you just, there really aren't good words to describe. You just know that this was not good. This was a bad situation.
It happened just after 3 p.m. on December 26, 2017. Nurse Radonda Vaught mistakenly administered a dose of the paralytic medication, vecuronium.
I didn't give her the Versed that we talked about. I gave her vecuronium. And I remember Lindsay, a nurse practitioner on our unit who I have an enormous amount of respect for, she knew, she knew exactly what I knew. And she just said, I'm so sorry. We knew that this was the worst possible situation.
Unfortunately, it appears Vanderbilt's chief health system officer had negligently failed to implement federally required safe medication policies. But even after the fatality, he failed to correct perilous conditions. He left all patients in immediate jeopardy. The hospital's cover-up lasted 9 months. Finally, after a whistleblower complaint, a scathing CMS deficiency report laid bare multiple system failures. Charlene Murphy's death could have been prevented if Dr. Pinson had implemented federally required patient safety standards. In a press release, Vanderbilt administrators claimed they immediately took necessary corrective actions. However, CMS reported no corrective actions were taken. Dr. Pinson had failed to implement required policies for monitoring patients receiving high-alert meds. When it mattered most for Charlene Murphy, no barcode scanning was available. Two-nurse verification is widely practiced with high-risk medications, but Vanderbilt had no two-nurse verification. Administrators concealed this tragic medical error from the Tennessee Department of Health in violation of state law. Administrators appear to have kept their board of directors in the dark in violation of federal regulations. To reinstate federal funding, Dr. Pinson was required to bring Vanderbilt in compliance with CMS regulations. In Vanderbilt's official statement about the fatality, administrators hid their responsibility. They transferred all blame and accountability to Nurse Vaught.
Vanderbilt University Medical Center said today in this statement, here's part of it, that the drug mix-up occurred because the nurse bypassed multiple safety mechanisms that were in place to prevent such errors. The hospital says it took what it calls appropriate personnel actions following the mistake.
A Vanderbilt law professor, who was also the Nashville district attorney, indicted Nurse Vaught for reckless homicide and abuse of an impaired adult. Notably, Mr. Funk's indictment matched Vanderbilt's placing all blame on Nurse Vaught. Surprisingly, Vanderbilt actively supported efforts to send Ms. Vaught to prison. Vanderbilt handed the prosecution privileged documents barred from use in any judicial proceeding.
Veritas report that you just identified for security that was prepared by Nurse Vaught is a privileged communication, is it not?
Correct. That's my understanding, under the Tennessee Quality Statute.
Right.
Correct.
But ultimately, you all turned those privileged confidential communications over to the district attorney's office, is that right?
I believe so.
I assume you are familiar with the Tennessee state statutes regarding confidentiality of this type of communication.
Correct.
If someone had come to you in the fall of 2018 and said, we want to turn over Radonda Vaught's privileged communication to the district attorney's office, would you have approved that?
I would not have approved that.
A state investigator was tasked with gathering internal Vanderbilt documents on Radonda Vaught.
I did gather a lot of documents, a medical record, personnel files, facility investigation. I was not able to get because Vanderbilt notified me that was part of the Veritas report, and that's a protected document, so I could not get that.
The Vanderbilt cover-up made certain that medical records did not reveal vecuronium was given. Vanderbilt's clinical risk manager did not believe Radonda should document her medication error.
I believe that then it would not have been appropriate for her to go back in and document.
Radonda was asked by a Tennessee investigator if nurse manager Misty Ashby told her not to chart her medication error.
Misty told you not to go back and do it? No, there was no reason to go do it?
Essentially, I never scanned that I had given her this medication. Do I need to go back and do that now? And she said no.
Later, the Tennessee Board of Nursing sanctioned Ms. Vaught for failing to chart her medication error. Radonda Vaught's Veritas report states Nurse Rachel Green was present in Charlene Murphy's ICU room when Radonda told caregivers she accidentally administered vecuronium. But afterward, Nurse Green falsified Charlene Murphy's medication administration record. She charted that vecuronium was not given.
We never want to cause harm. I mean, nobody wants to cause harm, right? And that's our commitment, is that if something happens that we could prevent in the future, we have an obligation to figure out what happened, how it happened, and try to prevent that in the future. We do something called an event analysis when there's an unexpected death, especially when there's been harm. And so we started to go down the path of an event analysis, which I believed happened the next week.
Did you tell the family about the medication?
Later, throughout the civil litigation process, there were other times where we discussed the entirety in much more detail of our findings.
If they'd been honest from the beginning, it would be easier to accept, but there's been so many lies, so many different stories. If they'd been honest from the beginning, it would be easier to accept, but there's been so many lies, so many different stories.
An expert offered his opinion about the monetary value of this case.
Having about 23 years experience resolving and defending medical negligence claims, I can assure you that it was a significant settlement amount, probably in several $1 million would be my best estimate based upon the facts and the clear liability of a medication error.
Vanderbilt administrators and their attorney appeared before the Tennessee Hospital Licensing Board to address issues about the case. Dr. Pinson spoke.
We convened a team to analyze the event.
CMS ruled that a legally required analysis was not conducted.
We reported the patient's death to the medical examiner.
Vecuronium was hidden from the medical examiner by Vanderbilt physicians. By preventing autopsy and toxicology reports, the scientific cause of death could not be determined.
We did not report the patient's death to the Department of Health, since Tennessee law has not required reporting of medication errors since 2009.
CMS legal ruling. The hospital failed to report this incident to the Department of Health as mandated. The medical examiner testified about a phone call received from Dr. Zimmerman.
Another physician said that the physician heard from other sources that potentially there is a medication error caused the death of the patient. But the doctors stressed that we don't have a record on that. It's just a hearsay.
When you were filling out a death certificate, was there anything concrete or conclusive in the medical record to lead you to believe that vecuronium had?
Nothing that I had heard or that I saw in the medical record, no.
Vecuronium appears multiple times in Charlene Murphy's medical records. At 4:51 p.m., roughly 2 hours after vecuronium was administered, caregiver Judy Booker's notes reveal vecuronium appeared under the heading Current Facility Administered Medications. At 6:28 p.m., nurse practitioner Stephanie Mayer's notes also include vecuronium under the heading Current Facility Administered Medications. At 10:23 a.m. the next morning, Roy Neely signed off on Stephanie Mayer's notes, acknowledging her notation of vecuronium. Dr. Neely was also personally told by Nurse Vaught that she accidentally administered vecuronium. Dr. Neely, an anesthesiologist, suspected vecuronium may have caused the death. The prosecution team had 3 years before trial to review multiple entries of vecuronium in Charlene Murphy's medical records. Yet the lead prosecutor deceived the jury. He claimed vecuronium wasn't in the medical records.
We all know it wasn't in the record. So no one at the time when Dr. Zimmerman is looking at this record is there any mention of vecuronium going?
As soon as the medication error was discovered, Nurse Vaught quickly told staff what had happened. She listed caregivers, managers, and administrators whom she notified.
Were you also Charlotte Murphy's doctor or part of her care team?
I was.
What was your involvement?
She was admitted to my team that I was in charge of.
So, were you attending?
I was, yeah, I was.
Risk Manager Moat testified that on the day of Miss Murphy's death, she was able to officially verify that vecuronium had been accidentally administered to Charlene Murphy.
I spoke in the morning gathering information from the clinicians and just getting their memories, really, and trying to do fact gathering. And by noonish or 1 o'clock, I thought I had enough information to confirm that there had been a medication error.
Ms. Mott also secured the remaining vecuronium that was the physical evidence in a locked file cabinet. However, in Tennessee, only the medical examiner can complete a death certificate for an accidental non-natural death. Yet 14 days later, Dr. Zimmerman, without any legal authority, falsely certified Miss Murphy died a natural death. Since 2008, CMS has not accepted hospital charges for a never event. Nurse manager Misty Ashby told Nurse Vaught not to chart her medication error. Later, Nurse Rachel Green falsified the medical record by charting that vecuronium was not given. A neurology resident concealed vecuronium from the medical examiner. In addition, he omitted vecuronium from the report of death. An attending physician falsely certified the death was natural. The deputy CEO claimed state law did not require reporting the fatal medication error to the Department of Health. His claim was untrue.
Quote, cover-up by Vanderbilt, in your opinion?
I saw no evidence of a cover-up from Vanderbilt with anything. I saw no evidence of a cover-up from Vanderbilt with anything.
It's within our reach to really be a dominant player in academic medicine, in science, nationally and worldwide. The other reason that our healthcare and our hospitals and clinics and our programs are becoming highly ranked is, in fact, the extraordinary care we provide.
Vanderbilt's Dr. Hickson explained why Vanderbilt didn't report deaths from medical errors. At a patient safety conference, attorney Martin Hatley shared Dr. Hickson's explanation.
And when we've talked to the people at Vanderbilt about it, they basically said that they were not reporting because other hospitals in their state weren't reporting things like this either, and they would look worse if that were happening. And that's just not an acceptable kind of positioning, and it's been normalized. Jerry Hickson, he's the Chief Patient Safety Officer, but he answered that question candidly in a couple of different venues. I give Jerry a terrific amount of credit for his honesty.
Was the health-related boards, were they notified?
No.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, can I give you a little history? So there is a Department of Health.
Vanderbilt's Diane Moat made a significant admission. Tennessee law requires the submission of an incident report to the State Department of Health when a patient is physically harmed. However, risk manager Moat, an attorney, testified she and Vanderbilt staff were confused and didn't understand the state law. Therefore, non-reporting occurred for 9 years, from 2010 through 2018. However, if Vanderbilt's rate of fatal medical errors matched the national average, hundreds of other preventable fatal medical errors were undisclosed or hidden by Vanderbilt. During the 9 years of non-reporting, Chesta Shoemaker, a registered nurse, was one of many other cases. She died from multiple medical errors made by a resident during and after a central line placement. Dr. Gretchen Edwards, a second-year surgical resident, was the caregiver who made the preventable fatal errors.
Dr. Edwards, who ordered the central venous catheter that you placed into Chesta Shoemaker on April 13th, 2017?
I discussed it with Dr. Betzold.
Dr. Edwards inserted the catheter into the right common artery rather than the right internal jugular vein. However, Dr. Edwards compounded the error. She failed to follow a critical hospital policy requiring verification of placement with ultrasound or pressure tubing. Unfortunately, the attending physician was a no-show. If he had supervised the resident as required, the patient would have had a much better chance for survival. However, Dr. May falsified a medical record claiming to be present during the central line placement. Just 3 months later, Vanderbilt settled a false claims lawsuit. $6.5 million was refunded to Medicare and others. Allegedly, Vanderbilt had billed Medicare for the phantom services of attending physicians. 7 hours passed before the supervising fellow identified the medical error. The fellow told Dr. Edwards to page the on-call vascular surgeon. He could repair the torn artery and remove a possible blood clot. Then the supervising fellow left. At that critical point, Gretchen Edwards made a grievous decision. She disregarded her supervisor's instructions. She did not contact the vascular surgeon. Instead, she pulled out the catheter by hand and held pressure. She may have released a blood clot. Later, a CT scan revealed a blood clot cutting off blood circulation to the right hemisphere of the brain. A stroke ended Chesta Shoemaker's life. However, after the tragic event, Dr. Edwards received full support from both fellow residents and administrators. Chesta Shoemaker's son, Brett, had remained at his mother's bedside during her hospitalization. He questioned the veracity of the staff's explanation about his mother's death. He filed a malpractice suit. Finally, he learned from depositions that if Dr. Edwards had called the vascular surgeon as instructed, his mother's life might have been saved. However, before the scheduled trial, Vanderbilt settled the case with a non-disclosure agreement. Vanderbilt protected Dr. Edwards. She would not have to testify in a trial about her fatal errors. Dr. Edwards is now a general surgery specialist.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
We have.
All right. Would the defendant please stand and face the jury?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Radonda Vaught, guilty of criminally negligent homicide.
Nurses arrived from throughout the U.S. to support Radonda during her sentencing. The nationwide consensus was explicit. Criminalizing the honest reporting of mistakes was a devastating setback for patient safety and the nursing profession. But observers also recognized Vanderbilt administrators had refused to acknowledge their systemic failures. They wrongfully shifted all blame to Nurse Vaught.
And will enter an order today placing the defendant on supervised probation for an effective period of 3 years, and will defer entry of judgment pending successful completion of that probation. And that will be the order of the court.
All rise.
The arrest of Radonda undid, in my opinion, the very fundamental doctrine of just culture. Undone with district attorneys that decide to go after one individual at the exclusion of doing anything about a hospital that, unlike the nurse, did not admit to anything initially and broke the law.
Vanderbilt conducted a comprehensive cover-up of Charlene Murphy's death from vecuronium. The cover-up required the coordinated actions of administrators and caregivers. In a press release, administrators concealed major systemic gaps in patient safety. All blame was disingenuously shifted to Nurse Vaught. Risk manager Moat oversaw a quick financial settlement with the Murphy family. However, she concealed the true circumstances of Miss Murphy's death. Nurse manager Ashby instructed Nurse Vaught not to chart her medication error with vecuronium. Nurse Vaught was required to violate state and federal regulations. Nurse Green charted that vecuronium was not given. She falsified the medication administration record. Resident Adam Hartman did not disclose vecuronium to the medical examiner's death investigator. Dr. Hartman also omitted vecuronium from the report of death. Attending physician Eli Zimmerman made a false entry on the death certificate. He certified Miss Murphy died a natural death. The deputy CEO provided untrue and misleading testimony to the Tennessee Hospital Licensing Board. However, it appears Dr. Pinson's financial management skills were rewarded. His salary nearly tripled over 5 years.
Now, Glenn Funk, who's the DA, who was getting a lot of attention around this time because this is his office that is bringing the charges against a Vanderbilt nurse for a medical mistake. There are rumors, conspiracy theories in Nashville that maybe there was some entity behind this oddly aggressive action against this nurse. A competing health system, Vanderbilt University itself, to bring attention away from its error in not reporting and other errors related to this case. I don't know. I have no opinion on any of those, but those are definitely circulating ideas because to have a DA so aggressively go after a nurse for an honest mistake with such a significant charge, it is odd.
Two insiders quite familiar with Vanderbilt's culture and management style shared their views. They believe Vanderbilt law professor and district attorney Glenn Funk would not have indicted Nurse Vaught without the full support of top Vanderbilt administrators.
My office always consults with victims, and the most important thing is to make sure that we know what the victim's wishes are